The idea of adding Myles, obviously, to get to that place, you had a waiving stretch, Damian Lillard, the largest waiving stretch of all time. How did you guys become comfortable with that idea? That dead money was going to be on your books, but also it might give you the chance to get Myles.
Yeah, I mean, Eric, first of all, huge credit to our staff. The group thinks creatively. You know, our ownership group really forces us to think outside the box, look at problems in a different way, look for solutions in a different way. And so, you know, we had multiple paths throughout the course of an off season, thinking about how can we take this team to the next level, how can we improve. And, you know, Myles is sitting there as the best free agent in all of the market, and you looked at ways in which we could potentially get to that and truly take our team and retool it, rethink it, modernize our style of play, impact Giannis and his development and his growth as a playmaker, the way that Doc put him in positions at the end of the season in the playoffs, and it just was a perfect fit. And so those are big decisions with big financial ramifications, big roster ramifications, but you get comfortable with it because you get a chance to sit with this guy and put him on your team and watch those two play together with the rest of our core group that's built to fit Giannis and maximize his skill set. So a lot of lift, a lot of load, great people, great investment and trust with our ownership, and here we are today.
If you could sit down before free agency started and draw the perfect fit next to Giannis, it was a picture of him.
Played against Giannis for quite some time now, 4 or 5 times a year. And a couple years ago, we played him, 9, 10 times, whatever it was. So very familiar, with his game, what he's capable of. And, I do see a seamless fit as well. He's someone that is able to push the ball, get out in transition, create for the people. He's developed a jumper. Obviously defensively, his intangibles are there. And, I think our fit is just, it's going to be a pretty cohesive fit.
Myles Turner in a Bucks jersey might just be the cleanest front court fit Giannis Antetokounmpo has ever had during his time in the NBA. But Turner isn't just some shiny new piece. He's stepping into a role that Brook Lopez held down for years. And let's be clear, Lopez is a Milwaukee legend, and he was critical to the team's identity during his Bucks tenure, as he not only helped anchor Milwaukee's formerly dominant interior defense alongside Giannis, but he also stretched the floor enough to give 34 the room he needed to dominate the interior on the offensive end. But as the years have gone on, Father Time has slowly started to creep up on Lopez, and the once formidable Defensive Player of the Year candidate began to become a hell of a lot more exploitable on that end of the floor. So it was clear that the Bucks needed to pivot. The only question was how, because Lopez himself ended up walking for nothing in free agency when he signed a 2-year deal with the LA Clippers earlier this offseason, and outside of a 2031 first-round pick, Milwaukee was extremely short on valuable trade assets and had zero cap flexibility. So they decided to pull off the unthinkable. In a move that still doesn't feel real, the Milwaukee Bucks waived Damian Lillard and stretched the remaining $112 million on his contract over the next 5 seasons. The largest waive-in stretch in NBA history. And just to veer off the script for a moment and give you guys a true insight into how I was feeling at the time of this news, I was absolutely heartbroken for Dame. I know all the reporting suggested he was thrilled and he was able to reunite with the Blazers, but damn, this man put his body on the line for the Bucks organization, rushing back from a blood clot in his calf faster than anyone I had ever seen, just to tear his Achilles 2 games later. And that doesn't even mention the fact that when he initially requested a trade out of Portland, Milwaukee wasn't even a desired destination of his. Yet he willingly embraced the Bucks when the trade went down and tried to make the most of the opportunity. It just didn't end up working out. So I've got all the love and respect in the world for Dame Lillard, and I wish him nothing but the best with his rehab and his second chapter in Portland. But the fact that I needed to take a minute to stop the video and give Dame his flowers perfectly highlights the magnitude of this move and the ripple effect it had across the league. Because after Lillard's Achilles tear, the only rumors coming out of Milwaukee centered around Giannis trades. But once again, John Horst has pulled a rabbit out of his hat in an attempt to keep his franchise player happy. And this isn't just any roster adjustment. It's a statement. The Bucks are done trying to find the perfect superstar complement for Giannis and are instead doubling down on depth and fit. And Myles Turner might just be the key to unlocking it all. Offensively, Turner's greatest superpower is pretty obvious. It's his ability to stretch the floor, as he's coming off a season in which he shot nearly 40% from deep on close to 6 attempts per game and a slightly increased 40.2% off the catch. And of course, that kind of long-range shooting makes him a seamless fit next to Giannis, since it pulls rim protectors away from the paint. But here's the thing, Turner's value isn't just that he can hit threes, it's how defenses are forced to guard him because of it. Take the pick and roll for example. He's not much of a bruiser when it comes to setting screens, and he doesn't always make great contact, but he's still one of the most effective roll men in the league because opposing bigs can't just sit back in the paint when defending him. They have to step out way higher than they normally would against a traditional center, which has the potential to open up Milwaukee's entire offense, and it makes him a really interesting two-man partner for Giannis. But more on that later. Out of the pick and roll itself, Turner's tendencies are pretty clear. He's never been one to usually roll hard to the rim, unless he has a good opportunity to exploit a mismatch against a smaller defender. In these spots, you'll typically find Myles sealing the nearest help defender, since the big is away from the paint, and then burying said help defender under the basket to punish the mismatch and finish near the rim. And Myles is great at doing this. However, if he can't force a switch onto a more favorable matchup in help, he's not great at going up with guys his own size, which explains why he's around the league average efficiency-wise amongst other centers within the restricted area. So instead of always rolling hard, Turner prefers to slip out of screens early and roll towards the free throw line and elbows to get into one of his patented mid-range jumpers. And with his defender often trailing behind, he usually has all the space he needs to rise up. But the crazy thing is, he doesn't even need that much space. Turner is one of the most efficient mid-range shooters at his position, knocking down nearly 56% of his long twos last season. That's 87th percentile amongst bigs. He shoots over smaller defenders with ease, and even against guys his own size, his stroke is rarely affected because he's excellent at catching and keeping the ball high on his jumpers. And because he has such a high release point, opposing defenses can't even send extra pressure from the gaps to bother him, as any sort of hard stunts from gap defenders out of the short roll are useless, and he'll shoot right over them as well. Being a 6'11 big with a 7'4 wingspan and a jump shot, you just can't bother this guy's release, especially in the mid-range. And if teams try to play him one-on-one from the mid-post, he's shown he can provide a little bit of self-creation as well, as Myles is capable of putting the ball on the floor and flashing the occasional sidestep or step-back jumper. And speaking of putting the ball on the floor, Turner's ability to attack late closeouts is vastly underrated for a big man, and he's especially dangerous when going at slower-footed bigs who are scrambling to recover after he pops out to the three-point line, as he's mobile enough to put the ball on the deck and go right by them. But as good as he looks putting the ball on the floor, facing up, and operating out of the mid-range, the same success doesn't really carry over when he's got to create for himself in the low post. And that goes back to what I mentioned earlier about why he doesn't always roll hard to the rim. Against bigs his size, Turner just isn't a consistently strong finisher, and his efficiency around the rim is only about league average. When he tries to post up, those same limitations become clear. And a good reason why is due to his unpolished low post game at the NBA level. His go-to move is to turn over his right shoulder with a hook or a short jumper because that's his dominant side. However, he's not even particularly efficient when turning to a post hook going right. Yet, even with that being said, opposing defenses will still try to take away the right spin because he's almost unwilling to turn over the left shoulder. And because of this, you'll see defenders sit on his right shoulder in an attempt to make him go left. And on the rare occasion he does spin over the left shoulder, he'll either continue to try to force up a shot using his right hand, even in an awkward position, or he'll settle for a jumper with all of his momentum falling away from the basket. Another thing that really limits Myles on the block is his hands. Simply put, Turner just doesn't have the greatest hands. He tends to drop a lot of passes and fumbles with the ball in the low post, which makes him prone to getting ripped within the interior on a consistent basis. And like Brook Lopez, Turner can also be prone to picking up offensive fouls when battling for position down low, and that's on top of his somewhat frequent moving screens. Showing him multiple bodies down low also makes Turner extremely uncomfortable and stifles his decision making, which brings us right into his playmaking. And I believe there are two types of playmakers in basketball: players who can make plays with the ball and players who can make plays without the ball. Turner is certainly not the former, and that's exemplified by the fact that he has one of the worst assist to turnover ratios at his position. To put it plainly, he just can't make plays with the ball in his hands. As an offensive hub, he can't be trusted because his reads are extremely predictable. Whether he's trying to feed mismatches in the post or initiate DHOs above the break, Turner's eyes are always locked on exactly where he wants to go with the ball, which makes him very easy to read and leads to turnovers. And although we've seen Myles make strides as a short roll playmaker, he's incapable of making the correct read on a consistent enough basis to truly punish opposing defenses. However, without the ball in his hands, Turner is pretty capable of creating for himself and his teammates, as he's an active off-ball mover who uses his hands and constant activity to occupy defenders, sometimes even baiting them out of position before cutting to the rim. He also does a great job of relocating on baseline drives, giving his teammates an outlet for easy kickouts. And the most apparent example of his off-ball playmaking is his gravity as a floor-spacing big man in the pick and roll. Now just envision that alongside Giannis's downhill gravity. If the defense decides to blitz GA off the screen, he can hit Turner on the short roll for a mid-range jumper. If they play drop, they're either allowing Giannis to attack the basket with a full head of steam or conceding an open three to Turner off the pop. Try to defend at the level, and they probably give GA too much time to dissect their defense. Overall, Turner's offensive game does draw many parallels with that of Brook Lopez, but they're different. Myles isn't as big of a rim-rolling threat because he simply isn't as willing as Brook is to roll to the basket. And although a 37-year-old Brook Lopez isn't some insane vertical lob threat, that is one dimension of his pick and roll game that Myles doesn't possess, as Turner's hands and unwillingness to roll hard make it difficult for him to ever be in a position to pose a vertical threat to the opposing defense. In fact, Myles only caught 3 lobs throughout the entirety of last season, regular season and playoffs combined. In addition, Lopez is a much better low post scorer than Turner, and it isn't even close. But where Myles separates himself from Brook is in the capability to play within a fast-paced offense. By no means is Myles Turner some freakishly fast dude. Actually, it's quite the opposite. But unlike BL, Turner has proven that he can keep up with a fast-paced offense and run the floor throughout the duration of a game in Indiana, which almost mitigates the need of being an elite low-post scorer anyways, because the Pacers never asked Turner to consistently post up and go get a bucket. They just play way too fast for that to be a part of their offense. All they asked of him was to take advantage of low-post mismatches whenever they were generated, and for the most part, he did. In Milwaukee, I'd expect the Bucks to ask him to do pretty much the same things, because as Doc Rivers and John Horst previously alluded to in the intro, the Bucks plan on playing fast and in transition next season, which they're now fully capable of doing given that this is one of the youngest rosters that the Bucks have had in recent memory. And if I'm being honest, the Bucks didn't even utilize BL's low post scoring bag nearly enough anyways. He was too often relegated to the three-point line instead. Plus, in the mid-range and short roll area, Brook Lopez doesn't even compare to Myles. He did have a decent push shot that he's developed in recent years, but the volume and quality of Brook's mid-range looks just aren't the same. His release is much slower, and he just doesn't provide the same level of self-creation ability that Turner can from that area of the floor. And look, as I've already mentioned, Turner's not without his flaws. He's not a dominant low-post scorer, can't be used as a playmaking hub, and isn't a big that you can just dump it down to at any time to get an easy basket. But the reality is, Milwaukee doesn't need him to be that guy. What they do need is a big who can stretch the floor, punish defenses in the pick and roll, run the court, and keep pressure on opponents with his shooting. And that's exactly where Turner shines. And next to Giannis, his offensive skill set doesn't just fit, it has the potential to unlock everything the Bucks want to do. Which brings us to the defensive side of the ball, where Myles is most known for his elite rim protection, as Turner has a career average of 2.2 blocks per game, which ranks 19th in NBA history, and he boasts the title of Pacers' all-time blocks leader. Standing at 6'11 with a 7'4 wingspan, Turner is great at defending in help and from the weak side, and he's capable of making some pretty incredible defensive recoveries overall. In pick and roll actions, Turner's traditionally put in a drop like Brook Lopez, because this is where he's most effective. But that's just the base of his defense. Turner's value goes way beyond just sitting in a drop. He's capable of stepping out and defending screens at the level thanks to his imposing size and active hands, as he's great at using his length to disrupt passes when defending in this spot. The only drawback is that quick twitch, shifty guards will give him problems in this coverage, whether by going right by him or rejecting the initial screen to force Turner to defend in space, which is something he doesn't excel at given he doesn't have the quickest feet. So it's definitely most ideal to have Turner in a drop so he can recover to his man and protect the rim easier. But he has proven that he can step out and defend at the level and even switch onto the perimeter for a possession or two if needed. Again, against those quick twitch guards, it'll be tough. But he's not a complete cone out there, especially at the end of shot clocks. And even if Turner does get beat out of pick and roll at the initial point of attack, he's great at getting back into the play by chasing someone down from behind or making the correct rotation to meet someone at the rim. As for his post defense and ability to guard face-ups within the three-point line, he's honestly one of the better post defenders in the NBA, as his combination of size and length makes him borderline immovable, even for the most physically imposing bigs in the league. He's also really good at absorbing contact from other bigs off the drive or in the low post, and then using his active hands or verticality to make a play on the ball. And that strength really shows up when Turner gets to defend more traditional bigs, the ones who don't space the floor and would rather live around the rim. Those matchups actually play right into his hands, because they allow Turner to camp out near the paint for most of the game and focus on what he does best: protect the rim and help on drives. Even when these types of bigs try to bring Myles up in the ball screen actions, he usually knows to stay dropped unless the ball handler is capable of torching him from distance. But the real test for Turner comes against floor spacing bigs, because these players take Myles away from the paint and force him to defend in space, which can be a struggle, and he does give up a decent number of threes against these matchups. But if he can show his hands early and take away the three, Turner can usually win these possessions by using his body to knock opposing players off their spots off the drive. Because if you think about the true floor spacing bigs in the NBA, Wemby, Chet, Cat, Brook Lopez, Triple J, and Kristaps Porzingis probably come to mind. But guys like Wemby and Chet tend to struggle against Myles because they're not able to move him inside of the three-point line. So if their outside shot isn't falling, it's probably going to be a rough night for either of those two. and that's even with a significant advantage in foot speed. And while guys like Jaren Jackson Jr. and Brook Lopez are more physically imposing, they lack the foot speed to truly burn Myles off the dribble like Chet or Wemby might. The only legitimate unicorn that consistently gives Turner trouble is Karl Anthony Towns, thanks to his unique blend of burst and strength from the center position. Of course, Jokic and Embiid also fall into this unicorn category as well, but nobody can truly stop Jokic, and Joel hasn't really been healthy enough for the eye test in the last 2 seasons. But going back to this general theme of defending floor spacing bigs, if Myles plays his matchup a little too tight on the perimeter, he can get burned because he doesn't have the foot speed to compensate. So again, quicker bigs like Wemby, Chet, or even a Bam Adebayo can beat him off the dribble if he overplays the matchup. But even with those occasional struggles against quicker bigs, or even switching out on the shifty guards, the fact that Turner can at least hang in those situations is the biggest separator between him and Brook Lopez at this stage of their respective careers. Lopez, although still a good rim protector, can't really defend anywhere outside of the restricted area, and is therefore only limited to defending in a drop, as opposed to Turner, who gives you a little more versatility across different matchups, as he's able to drop, defend at the level, hedge and recover, guard the perimeter when needed, and is overall just much better at guarding in space than Lopez is. However, like Brook, Turner is very similar in the fact that he's a poor defensive rebounder, but Giannis Antetokounmpo can certainly help him out in this department. Another way in which Giannis helps Turner is by elevating his impact as a rim presence. With Myles defending the other team's 5-man, it allows Giannis to continue playing that free safety role for the Bucks by roaming everywhere else. Because if there's one drawback to Turner's rim protection, it's the fact that he's never been capable of being a sole defensive anchor, as he can get pulled out of position at times due to hugging his own matchup or watching the ball. But in his defense, some of these defensive lapses can also be attributed to the Pacers' constant extended ball pressure, which always brought up Turner much higher defensively. Plus, alongside the Greek Freak, Myles doesn't need to be the sole anchor of the defense. He just needs to be the guy that can defend his matchup and protect the paint against all forms of penetration, while GA helps him out on the backside. And with this sort of blanket coverage from a former Defensive Player of the Year, I see Turner making his first all-defensive team in 2026. So when you zoom back out and look at the full picture, Turner's game is the perfect complement to a Giannis-led team. On offense, he spaces the floor, and defensively, he holds down the 5 spot so Giannis can continue to freelance as the ultimate disruptor. And at the end of the day, the most important job of the Milwaukee Bucks front office is to provide 34 with teammates that maximize his skill set. And Turner certainly fits that mold. The only question is, does the acquisition of Myles Turner move the needle enough to justify the wave and stretch of Damian Lillard? A gamble so massive that it could end up costing the Bucks everything if it doesn't go according to plan. But if it does,
the Milwaukee Bucks are NBA champions once again.